afternoon, Chicagoland, and here I am for another Wednesday afternoon presentation of Life Experiences with William Pelarenos right here on WRMN1410.com. I've been doing radio broadcasting now for 12 years, and a large majority of my experience has been with true crime. Seeing that I was a policeman for 27 and a half years, I think I got a little forte in that subject. So while I'm always watching documentaries and stuff, I happened to run into a very interesting documentary on Hulu, and it's called Ruby Red-Handed. And what it refers to is the ruby red slippers from the movie The Wizard of Oz. Matthew, have you seen The Wizard of Oz?
Oh, many a times.
All right, so
Yes.
That's going to be the subject is this documentary today. I'm going to get the producer and narrator of that documentary on the air. But first, Matthew, tell everybody where we're located.
We are located at Studio 14 Douglas Avenue here in downtown Elgin. And, of course, you can text us, 505-926-1410. We're also on youtube.com/WRMN radio.
One more time with the YouTube.
That's youtube.com/WRMN radio.
Magnificent. So we're here every Wednesday, and today we're going to link up with Maria Oz, producer of the film, I should say documentary, Ruby Red-Handed, the theft of the ruby red slippers from the Wizard of Oz, correct?
Yeah, stealing America's most famous pair of shoes. Yes, that's it.
Maria, thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate that. You're transmitting from Minnesota, so we couldn't have you in the studio. So you have Committee Films, which makes documentaries of true crime stories, correct?
Yes, Committee Films. We do a lot of different kinds of television series and programming, but I would say our main area that we focus on now really is true crime. Most of what we do is that right now.
Very good. As I mentioned to you right before we went on the air, I was a policeman for 27 and a half years, so I always watch true crime documentaries, but the majority of them, I would say 90% of them, if not more, are murder. So I'm trying to find a non-murder crime. And I ran across your documentary on Hulu, which has been on what now? Just about a year, right?
Just about a year, yes.
Yes. And I wanted to draw more attention to it. So I'm glad you came on the show today because we could talk about the little backstory. First of all, just tell us about the crime. There's 4 pairs of ruby red slippers, if I'm correct. Do you remember?
There's multiple pairs that are known that she would have worn during filming. There were several pairs created of ruby slippers for Judy Garland because she was dancing. She was doing all different kinds of things. And so, they needed to make several different pairs. I think it's a little bit fuzzy as to exactly how many pairs are out there. There's some hot debate amongst slippers enthusiasts about the exact number. But yes, we are able to track a certain number of those pairs and where they're located, and that is in the documentary. So for those that haven't seen the documentary, back around 2008, the slippers were stolen from a museum in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, not Michigan, Grand Rapids, Minnesota. They make that clear in the documentary because that was Judy Garland's home for many years growing up as a child. So, while they were on display there, somebody broke into the museum and took the slippers. And I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but historically, they were gone for 13 years. And your investigation or your documentary documents the investigation. Now, when you started the documentary, were those slippers already found? No, the slippers weren't found. And there's kind of an interesting backstory to how we stumbled into this in the first place. So I can tell you a little bit about that. Like I said, we do a lot of true crime now, but we also do other kinds of shows, many things for the History Channel or other networks like that. And so we were looking into the possibility of doing a television series about where certain pop culture things, artifacts and things had ended up, where is the Partridge Family bus, or where is, certain things like that. And so I knew that the ruby slippers had been stolen, actually, from the museum in Grand Rapids, which is the Judy Garland Museum. And I thought, well, we'll just go up there, talk a little bit about the slippers, and see if we can use that to help sell this idea about a pop culture artifact show. And when we went up there to film, we learned that a tip had come in that just might be a really valuable tip that could possibly lead to somebody who had the shoes. And, it had been over a decade since those shoes had been stolen. It seemed like a really big deal. We weren't able to get our pop culture artifact show picked up, but we did continue to follow the story of the ruby slippers, just thinking, maybe someday we'll be able to do something with this. And so we kept filming for years without knowing if it was ever going to go anywhere. And then ultimately it certainly did. And so we were able to make this documentary, but that's kind of how we got involved in it in the first place.
So you were really trying to solve a crime.
Yes. So my background is in investigative journalism. I've done that for a number of years. I did that early on in my career. I was an investigative producer for the local ABC and the CBS affiliates here in Minneapolis. So I did that for a while before starting Committee Films with my husband, Andy. And, I'm always interested in a good story, a mystery, digging into doing the research and trying to figure out who done it in the who done it. And I think this was a great story for that.
It is. And what people don't understand is theft of art. There's millions of dollars of stolen artwork out there.
Oh,
and
yes.
It goes back way before the Nazis were plundering Europe. Mm-hmm. And this goes back hundreds of years. There are theft of art cases. So what also people don't understand is that those shoes may not be art as some people, but they're an icon of I can't remember how they pronounce it.
Cultural artifact is one of the things, or one of the ways you might hear it referred to. So all of the different laws and things that exist that pertain to art, to fine art, also pertain to certain antiquities and objects of cultural relevance like that. And so certainly the shoes are art. They are extremely unique. And as we say, it really, I think you'd be hard pressed to find another object from television or film that is as instantly recognizable as the ruby slippers. Even if you've never seen The Wizard of Oz, I think most people may know what those shoes are. And so, I think certainly they are art.
Since 1939, when that film premiered, it's been shown over and over, and it still occasionally plays in theaters as a retro film. But for many years, as I was growing up, it was always shown around Easter time on one of those CBS or ABC, one of those channels. So it's like the 10 Commandments at Easter. But it was something that I grew up with, and I liked it, but I wasn't a fanatic. But a lot of films have fans that collect movie memorabilia, and there's millions of dollars in movie memorabilia.
Yes.
Now, I am a movie memorabilia collector, too. I collected posters since 1977. I've been to Comic-Con conventions, which they sell a lot of stuff. I've had celebrities sign my posters. They go to Comic-Cons. I met Ernest Borgnine, George Kennedy. I mean, they've passed away now. But it was an honor to meet them, and I always liked the backstory of what they were doing when they made this film. So people don't understand when they're watching this, when you have a kind of a funny sequence where one of the collectors says, "I collect all the buttons." And it seems funny, but I used to collect buttons too. And you show them. You bring them out when people are over. It's like a coffee table book. You show them, hey, this is my button from The Wizard of Oz. This is a Towering Inferno. The actual buttons that the studios put out. And movie memorabilia means something to those people that love the films. It's just like a painting.
It does. It's a connection that brings you not just to, the film or the TV show or whatever it is itself. I think it brings you some nostalgia, right? You remember where you were, who you saw something with, what it meant to you at that particular time of your life. And I think for any fans or people who watch The Wizard of Oz, you definitely have distinctive memories about that. I certainly remember the first time I watched it, and I was absolutely terrified, actually, of the flying monkeys. I still think that's nothing any child should see. But at the same time, the movie, like everybody I feel like has seen it or a version of it, at some point. Like, you think now about Wicked and the popularity of that, first as the musical and then as the movies. And, I think everyone's been exposed to The Wizard of Oz. And, I guess at the end of the day, we have Frank Baum to thank for that, who wrote that book originally. But it's a real piece of American culture and history.
Back in the 90s, I drove to Indiana, one state over from Illinois here. And they had this Wizard of Oz parade. But what it was a combination of the high school's homecoming parade and with the Wizard of Oz. And they had a couple of the actors that played the Munchkins still alive. And this had to be around 92, 93. So they bring them on. They're all waving. So it's not just Minnesota. That has, The Wizard of Oz has a fan base worldwide. And It's one of those cult films. And we did a whole episode, Matthew, on cult films. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorites and my friend's favorite, and we collect stuff, is Jaws. That has 50 years. And there's Facebook sites with tens of thousands of followers. Jaws has a following. So whether it be Wizard of Oz or Jaws, memorabilia from those films can be worth a lot of money.
Yeah. And that's kind of what made these shoes a target, I think. For people who don't know, Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and this comes out really strong, I think, in the film, is just this great town up in northern Minnesota, very down home, kind of rural, fun vibe. They have the Judy Garland Museum there. It is kind of the repository for more Judy Garland artifacts and memorabilia than anywhere else in the world. I have to tout it a little bit because we really enjoyed working with them, through this project, and they just have some fascinating things in their collection that you can go see. It's also her house, Judy Garland's house, is still there, decorated. You can see where she practiced on her stair landing, all her different performances. You can see all these different kinds of things. And, I would really encourage people to seek out not just the Judy Garland Museum, but places like this that really have, an instrumental role in, the backstory of some of these famous actors, actresses, movies, and whatnot.
Your film starts out as a nice investigation. Let's talk about the crime for a minute. You don't have to give exact dates, but they were missing for 13 years.
They were missing for 13 years. Yes, I can tell you about the crime.
So somewhere in the early 2000s, they were on display, and you go ahead with the story.
Yes, they're on display at the museum for the annual Judy Garland Festival, which was a big deal. And they had been on display there in previous years as well. There's a collector named Michael Shaw who, his shoes, this pair of ruby slippers that ultimately were stolen, they were nicknamed the traveling shoes. He would take these around the country. He loved showing them to fans, to people, taking pictures, all of that. And so he had them, he loaned them to the museum for the festival. And one night, somebody broke in, shattered the glass on the door at the museum, got inside, smashed the plexiglass case that the slippers were in, took the shoes, and was gone. And then it was discovered the next morning by one of the employees who opened up the museum for the day, and the shoes were missing. And so at that point, whoever had taken the shoes had a bit of a head start. A lot of questions about the security at the museum, which we talked quite a bit about that in the documentary. But there were no cameras, so there's no clues as to who might have taken them. One of the only clues, just one little sequin left behind on the floor there. And it really became kind of the ultimate whodunit. I think in this small town, immediately people just wondered if it was maybe a prank, because like you hear in so many true crime shows, right? This kind of thing just doesn't happen here. And, I think they thought it was teenagers. Did they throw them in the lake, or, one of these, they have these taconite mine pits that are like lakes just filled with water. Are they in there? What happened? I don't think anyone realized that something to the magnitude of what actually happened would have gone down in Grand Rapids, Minnesota.
I got to give you credit for putting this together. Did you do the editing?
We did everything. Yeah. So we do it all the research, the filming, the editing, the putting it together. Yes. Committee Films does all of that.
I love how you threw in local characters into the story as you're going along. And it was very humorous. There's this one police sergeant driving when he says, hey, this used to be a quiet town, but now it's so busy. I hate all this traffic. And you show the street, there's only 6 cars. This man has never been to Chicago or New York.
Yeah. Yes, Bob Stein. We got to be good friends kind of throughout this process, because we were filming really off and on for years, as I mentioned. And, we kind of stumbled into some search warrants and some things that maybe were supposed to be a little bit more top secret or sealed at the court than they were. And, we kind of agreed to sit on that for a little bit, because we were really playing the long game here. We're not out to ruin anybody's investigation. We want these shoes to be found as much as anybody else. And so it was more a matter of just waiting, until all the information really came out and we were able to tell a complete story. But Bob Stein, he's no longer with the Grand Rapids Police Department, but he and his partner, investigator Brian Matson, they were fantastic to work with, such personalities, great accents, great Minnesota accents, even stronger than mine. And so, yeah, it was a wonderful experience working with them.
I have to give you credit. You did a lot of investigation. It wasn't just filming interviews.
No.
You pulled the search warrants.
Yes, we pulled the search warrants. We approached this just like we do all of our other true crime. And we do the more traditional true crime as well. So many different cases of missing people, homicides, home invasions, all those hostage situations. We have done true crime programming in all of those spaces. And so just because this was a property crime, right, or a theft, it doesn't mean we would approach it any differently. And so, yes, all of the same rules apply. We need to get all the facts, find the search warrants, look for police reports, talk to not only the local police, but the FBI, try to figure out who was involved. And we did do all of that due diligence here.
I give you credit for the way you put everything together. The editing was smooth and flowing, and you threw in some humorous sequences in there, especially with the people. The lady sings the song from the movie, The Waitress. And you know what? I know it a little better because I watched it 5 times. I watched it Sunday night, was my last night watching it. It's one of the better put together documentaries, and it's not really depressing like those homicides. You know the person's going to die. I just watched one where it was a kidnapping, and by the end of the episode, they never saved her. She was murdered. But this theft was eventually resolved, so I knew there was a happy ending there. Because right in the beginning, the guy says they were missing for 13 years. So this is not a spoiler, Matthew.
Right. Not a spoiler. No, it is. I guess I like to think of it as, well, in the industry, in the television industry, there's a newer term of like cozy crime, right? It's not murder. It's not something like that. It's something, that you can kind of like, that pulls you in that same way, but it isn't going to be a murder. There's something else. And what you're really capitalizing on there is the mystery of it all. And I like to think of this show really, truly as kind of a love letter to the Wizard of Oz, to Minnesota, to the Judy Garland Museum, to Judy Garland herself. I think that we were able to really dive deep into the history of Judy, of the movie, of this town where this happened, and all of the people that this story has touched, and in all the different ways. It is probably, people ask me a lot, what's your favorite thing you've ever done in terms of television? And I this is definitely, if not my favorite, it's definitely up there, kind of in the top 3 things, I would say. It was very meaningful to be able to follow something through, to believe in the project, and ultimately get that sold to a network and on the air for everybody to see.
So I'm glad I got you on. So now I can get the facts.
Yes.
Watching this, I felt bad for a couple of people. First of all, the owner of the shoes, Michael Shaw. He was an avid collector. You went to his house. He had collections just from not Wizard of Oz, but he had the 10 Commandments from Charlton Heston carried in the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
He was a big movie memorabilia, and I can relate to that because my basement is full of movie memorabilia too.
Sure.
But I felt bad for him because he had those shoes insured for $1 million. And when the insurance company paid off, and then lawsuits began against the museum, of course, and as well as the agent. Now, he was very bitter that sold the policy. He said he almost lost his agency and he only made $100 on the
Bob Cushel, yes. Bob Cushel, he was great. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people
suffered.
I mean, they really did. Now, with Michael Shaw, in the end, he benefits big time when those shoes are auctioned off after they're found, which you'll see that at the end of our
Don't give away the price.
I will not give away all the great stuff there at the end. But certainly, I mean, he was just doing a nice thing, right? He was having these shoes on display for all the fans to see. And, sometimes you sit back and I think like, gosh, the audacity of somebody to just go in and take this, these shoes that were so beloved. I mean, who does that, right? And so I think there's sort of that, just a little tug at your heartstrings kind of a thing there. But Michael Shaw suffered, like you said, Bob Cushel suffered, certainly the museum, suffered, talking with the guys who were there at the time. It was tough. And then you're in this small town. So there's also the finger pointing. Who could have done it? Was it this person? Was it that person? It had a big effect.
We're going to go for a quick commercial break, but we'll get to the finger pointing because that caused a lot of stress to a lot of people too, because there's rumors that spread, whether you're in a small town or a large city. And now with social media, of course, rumors spread very easily. And people were falsely accused of being involved in the crime.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that on the second half. Stay with us, Maria. Don't go off Zoom.
Right.
Matthew, we're here on WRMN 1410 AM. Give the YouTubes again.
That's youtube.com/WRMN radio.
All right, Matthew's my producer. He's been a great producer for the last 2.5 years. He does all the technical stuff. I'm only the intellectual property. So we'll be right back. Stay with us right after this commercial break. Welcome back to the second half of Life Experiences with William Pelarenos. I am your host here, and we are talking about a true crime that occurred in Minnesota back in the early 2000s. That was the theft of the ruby red slippers that were worn by Judy Garland in the movie Wizard of Oz. Classic from 1939, has a cult following, and those shoes were stolen out of Grand Rapids, Minnesota. And the producer of a documentary called Ruby Red-Handed is here with us, Maria Oz. Thank you for sticking around. Let's get to the second half. Maria, how long did it take you to do the documentary from start to finish?
Oh, that's a good question. 7 or 8 years, believe it or not. And so I think I mentioned in the first half of your show, we really started filming just off and on, different material up in Grand Rapids. And we're based in Minneapolis, so it's a little bit of a drive up to Grand Rapids, but we would film every now and then, or when there seemed to be something maybe going on a little bit, or as police were actively investigating. I think that's one of the things now that viewers have really come to appreciate, is that ability to sort of follow along as an investigation is happening. And you being retired law enforcement, that can be a challenging thing to do, because you can't really talk about cases that aren't solved typically, right? And so it was a very unique opportunity for us to be able to do that. But we kept filming and just did not know if this was going to go anywhere. And then ultimately when this tip, it came to fruition that they were going to actually be able to get these shoes back, that was huge news. And so we kind of knew then, okay, it seems more likely we're going to be able to figure this out. But once the shoes were recovered, it was still years before anybody was actually charged in association with the theft.
Very, very well put documentary, and that's why I love it. It's on YouTube. What's the full title? Ruby Red-Handed?
So it's Ruby Red-Handed, Stealing America's Most Famous Pair of Shoes.
Okay. So during your investigation, you also found out that there may have been a connection to these Rockwell paintings that were stolen from a town a couple hundred miles away, correct?
Yes. Yes, this is correct. So,
And when I talk about Rockwell, we're talking about Norman Rockwell, the Saturday Evening Post. Anybody who's not in art, Matthew, do you know who Norman Rockwell is?
I have a couple plates.
Wow.
Yeah.
A collector.
Nice, a collector.
Okay, so go ahead with that story.
Yeah. So as we started to look into this, I got some information from an inside source that we should take a look at the Rockwell heist. That's what it's known as here in Minnesota, which there was a bunch of paintings, like you said, Norman Rockwell's, and then also some other paintings as well, but they were on display at Elaine Galleries, which was an art gallery in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. So St. Louis Park is in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, so much further south than Grand Rapids, where these shoes were stolen. But what was interesting about this case and had people wondering if there was a connection was certain individuals who maybe had a tie to the Rockwell heist. And so without saying too much, we started looking into that case as well, pondering things with the detectives up north, the investigators. Could these things be connected or not? And we did locate one individual who was in common in both cases, that proved to be a very intriguing part of the story.
Yes, because of your documentary, I ended up ordering the book, The Rockwell Heist.
Yes.
It was not easy to find.
Crazy.
No,
No,
it's
it's
out
not
of
easy.
print. I
Yes.
couldn't even find it on eBay. I had to go to my local library, and my library is part of a huge system in the
Yeah.
Chicagoland area. They found it in a library deep south, brought it to me. I had 2 weeks to read it. It's not a long book. It's only 158 pages. But just like your documentary, it documents the crime and the entire investigation and who were suspects, including falsely accused people. And one, going back to your documentary on the crime of the ruby red slippers, the guy I felt sorry for was the original owner, Michael Shaw, because rumors started circulating that he had them stolen for the $1 million insurance policy. And just to I hate spoilers, but I got to let everybody, the man was innocent. He had nothing to do with the crime. And I really felt bad because as a policeman, I've seen people falsely accused of crimes.
Yeah.
And you go through a lot of turmoil and trauma and emotional duress.
Yeah, I mean, I think immediately that was just one of the rumors that was out there. And I think that we're definitely living in a day and age where there's, you hear something and then it's perpetuated in different media, and nobody is stopping to really do due diligence to make sure what's out there is actually true. And I think that my word of caution to everyone who's watching all kinds of things is like, you really want to make sure you're getting your information from a good source where there's been actual high quality journalism to really delve into the facts, where it's supported by, police reports, court file information, all of that. I always, when people are saying, well, how do you tell what's the difference between a good true crime show and a bad true crime show? I have to be honest, I think when I'm watching, and I do watch, I'm a fan also of watching those kinds of shows, I'm always looking to see, was law enforcement involved in the actual production? Are they interviewed in the piece? Are families interviewed? Are the victims interviewed? Once you have all of those things together, that's what I think makes a really high quality program. When you're able to represent all the perspectives and to do justice to each person's true story, that's the only time you're going to have a show that kind of gives you a more complete picture. And so we really worked hard to do that here and in all of the different shows that we do.
So Michael Shaw not only lost the slippers, the insurance company, they didn't even pay the full policy. They paid a percentage. I think they only gave me 80% of it. And he had to suffer through rumors being spread. You know, you could tell he was upset, but he held his anger back during the interviews. I've interviewed a lot of people, so I can tell from body language, from tone, that this whole thing was upsetting him, the theft. And nobody likes to be a victim. I've been a victim myself. I've had cars stolen from me. Just recently, they stole my catalytic converter. You feel violated when anybody steals an item from you. The museum, of course, was sued by the insurance company because they wanted to collect some of their money back. I can't understand how the writer of the policy was sued. Do you know why he just wrote the policy? Why was he pulled into the lawsuit?
That is a complicated part of the story. And to be honest, I would have to look back at how that transpired. But that was one of the things that we were also digging in, trying to figure that out. I mean, ultimately, you know, with the lawsuit, there wasn't, you know, once Michael was able to get the insurance money for the shoes, I don't think that the lawsuit ever really transpired into much else after that because he was able to be paid for that. But it did a lot of damage to everybody involved, you know, and I think for a museum, my goodness, you have an object stolen worth this much money from your museum, that doesn't look good for you, you know, either. And, you know, I think everybody here, you know, hindsight's 2020. If you could have had security cameras, if you could have done some of these things, but this was also a bit of a different time. You know, you have to think back, I think it was 2005, right? When these were stolen. It's not like it is today. So think of how different your phone is today from 2005. You know, it's everything is different. And so, I think it really speaks volumes that in the end, which you'll see in the documentary, that Michael Shaw and the museum were able to make amends. So.
Yes. You know what? And I like how you documented the interviews. You could tell a lot of these people are suppressing emotions. The underwriter of the insurance, he makes a statement, I almost lost my agency because of this. I only made $100 off the policy. And you could tell he's very bitter. So anybody who's ever been through civil litigation, trust me, I've been there. I've been sued, have sued, and I will sue. So, yes, so civil litigation does take a lot of stress. It causes stress, and it causes physical and emotional problems. I'm telling you, especially if you're on the recipient of being sued. So I felt sorry for the underwriter of the policy. I felt sorry for Michael Shaw, who was the collector, was deprived. Now, 13 years later, he got the shoes back, but for 13 years, he didn't know if they were ever going to be recovered, if they were destroyed. He didn't know. He just had no clue. And you could tell.
And it wasn't just, you know, an investment for him.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It was a prized possession of his that he came into by way of knowing one of the guys who worked in the costume department, you know, back when these props were being gotten rid of, you know, and that's really what started the memorabilia craze, was when these studio lots were just getting rid of all this stuff that they just didn't think was valuable, you know, anymore.
Yes, you covered that. They even sold the Showboat from Showboat.
Yes, the Showboat from Showboat. Yes. And it's kind of crazy to think now, like, that, you know, there was a time these shoes weren't worth anything, right? And I can't remember, but they were just objects that people hadn't established. They hadn't put a value on those things yet. You know, it wasn't really until they were being auctioned off, and I think people were thinking of the cultural relevance and significance that having these items have, that, you know, it became, you know, a monetary type thing.
Yes. When back in the 70s, I used to work at a theater and the posters are supposed to go from theater to theater, but a lot of the theater managers, they want to pay the posters, so they throw them away. I worked I collect them. One of those posters ended up being worth over $1,000 because I've been collecting.
Well, for sure. And I mean, if you think about movie posters, I worked in a movie theater too. That was actually my first job. So that's funny. And I would take the posters as well, but you're right about those posters. And I know, there's stories out there of movie titles that have changed names. If you have a movie poster, I think, was it Return of the Jedi? That was maybe originally going to be Revenge of the Jedi. If you have a movie poster that says that, I mean, my gosh.
Big money.
Fortune. Yeah.
And there's also crimes in that. I've gone to many conventions, and I've had, I got some expertise, and people ask me, look at the poster. Is this the real deal? They ask me. Now, I said, I can't give you an expert opinion, but let me look at it. And I can see the staple marks that were in the theater. I can see the folding. There's clues, tips and clues. But some of this stuff is imitating. There are frauds out there. I know because I deal with other collectors. And when I used to go to these conventions of movie memorabilia conventions, I used to hang out with the dealers at nighttime, and we go to dinner, and they tell me, yeah, they tried to sell me a fraudulent one. Some of these guys are sharp. They're experts. They've been doing it for 40 years. Mm-hmm. So it's a business. It's a business.
Yeah. Well, once they were able to recover the shoes, which happened in a pretty elaborate sting operation in downtown Minneapolis, that was kind of unique. That was really crazy to hear about that. But after they got those shoes back, I mean, the authentication process to try to determine if these really were the missing pair of ruby slippers or a fake pair was significant. They were flown to the Smithsonian to be studied, to be looked at and examined. The Smithsonian also has a pair of ruby slippers, different pair, but they were able to study these, and they had just done a conservation project on the pair that they owned and discovered some very unique things, including the fact that this pair was the mismatched mates to the pair that they had. So that was very interesting. So at some point, the pair of shoes at the Smithsonian and the pair of shoes that were stolen from the Judy Garland Museum, the left shoe and the right shoe from each pair got mixed up. And so one of the ways they were able to tell that this was indeed the correct pair of shoes, the authentic pair that was missing, was that fact.
I didn't understand that when I watched the documentary. That part, I'm glad you explained that to me. So it was all the pairs are the same size. It's just they got mismatched.
Most of the pairs are the same size. I think one of the pairs is forgive me if this isn't correct for people who've watched it 5 times, but if I can remember correctly, I think one pair some were 5s and maybe there was a 5.5 pair. The larger pair being the one that she used for the dancing scenes when her feet any woman knows if you're wearing you're wearing heels and you're dancing around, you're doing all, your feet will swell, right? So she had a slightly bigger pair for those scenes. But yes, they realized that they knew all along they had a mismatched pair at the Smithsonian. I think maybe it was the 2 different sizes, if I remember correctly. And so then when they got this pair, it was obvious that these were the mates to the ones that they had. And so they must have just been mixed up when they were taken off the costume lot or something like that. There were other things they did too, obviously, to authenticate them. They were able to see that, for example, a couple of the sequins, I believe, had been painted. They'd had to be replaced during the filming with a regular sequin and painted over to match just because they had been damaged. Well, that was something indicative of them actually having been used in the film itself.
Yes. So they knew because of the mismatch that this was the traveling pair exhibit that were stolen.
Yeah. Correct.
Once the Smithsonian verified them, they came back and the FBI was involved by that time.
The FBI was involved. Yes, the FBI was involved. And we were in touch with them throughout this process as well. And so they, I think it's a big deal. I mean, the FBI is who investigates art crimes. That is, like you mentioned at the outset of your show here, they have this art crimes task force, and it's big, big business. Black market, the theft of art and antiquities proliferation on the black market of these items is a really big deal.
Yes, and by the time they got involved and got him back with the verification of the shoes by the Smithsonian, they had to fly him back, and it was a sealed box that the airport people didn't know what was in it. They kept, the flight attendant kept asking, "What's in the box?" That was a nice scene.
That was one of my favorite scenes. We did interview the flight attendant who was there when these FBI agents, boarded and early and had their box that, says fragile and it's just like buckled into the seat in between them so they can keep an eye on it. And it's like, what's in the box? What's in the box? But it was a fun element of the story to be able to cover.
Yes, if you ever dealt with any law enforcement, whenever we take a prisoner or something valuable in a plane, we pre-board. So the FBI pre-boarded. There was no passengers. They had this seatbelt in between them. They made sure nothing happened to those shoes. They couldn't afford them to have them stolen twice.
Right.
And there have been items that have been stolen twice. We don't have enough time for me to get into this story, but I got a good one for you. But you interviewed so many people over 7 years. I'm just curious, don't you have a lot of leftover footage that you could put another documentary together?
There's always leftover footage. Yes, there's always outtakes and things like that. And just things that didn't make the cut. People who didn't make the cut. It's difficult when you're putting something together to, it's like you have a time limit you have to fit into. We originally, just to give you a little more inside scoop, when we originally pitched this, we pitched it as an 8-part series. So that should give you a hint as to how much material we actually have and shot pertaining to this story versus the story, the amount that you saw in the documentary. And I think the documentary is excellent in terms of giving a really great, start to finish telling of the story. But there are many, many, many other places where, we could have taken this in a few different directions, angles that weren't covered, different leads that weren't followed, different things like that.
A small suggestion from a fan. Take some of that footage, put it together, call it Ruby Red Slipper Theft Solved, just like Bermuda Triangle Solved, UFO Solved. They have all these documentaries, the History Channel especially, Solved. The proof is out there. So what you do now, since the crime has been solved, work backwards and show the stuff that while you're looking, while you're interviewing people that they didn't know before the crime was solved. I'd love to see a part 2 to this.
Yeah, it would be good. We'd love to be able to do more with it. But yeah, it really seemed to resonate with people. We were really happy with it. It did really well on Hulu. Hopefully now we have another whole new audience. We'll get more viewers that way as well. It was nominated for Outstanding True Crime Documentary of the Year just this past year at the Crime Con convention. I know you mentioned you've been to Comic-Con. There's also Crime Con. And that was in
Las Vegas, right? Las Vegas?
It was in Las Vegas. Yes, we were there. And we had previously won an award in that same competition. It's called the Clue Awards for a different series we did, which I'll plug that here, which was called Me Hereafter, which is very good. That's also on Hulu, and is an ABC News Studios production with Committee Films. But that is more your traditional true crime. But this was nominated this year. We did not win for Ruby Red-Handed, which is okay. We were just happy to be nominated. But I think it just shows that there really is, an audience for that and that people really responded to it.
Yes, I think I'm going to try to get the word out, and I'm going to post it on LinkedIn and other about interviewing you, because people have not seen the documentary. There's so much, there's so many streaming services out there. I have to draw attention to it because I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I've watched it 5 times. It's well edited, well put together, and I'm sure you have 6.5 years of footage that you haven't used.
Yeah.
But as we're getting to the crime, as we're winding down here, the crime itself, the ruby red slippers are stolen 13 years before you get them back. I don't want to give away who was arrested, but I like your comments when these people are coming they're coming into federal court. They all got oxygen tanks, and you say, "Here's another guy with an oxygen tank." Can I tell you something? Whenever these gangsters get indicted, especially if they're elderly, they all walk into court with oxygen tanks. There's some kind of
and neck braces and, all these kinds of things. It really did feel at some point there towards the end like we were involved in a scripted television show. Like this was there's so many bizarre things that happened in this case that were all true. It was all true. But yes, there is some justice here to be had, but it took a long time, evidenced by the fact that the criminals were with oxygen masks. There's a lot of things that I think viewers would appreciate about this particular show. It is definitely something. We also get asked this question, can my kids watch it? Yes, I think your kids can watch this show. There is nothing, it's a real, I guess, family-oriented type show. This is something everybody could watch.
Everybody's watched that show for decades. The people who are no longer alive have seen that, The Wizard of Oz, all except for the one flight attendant with the FBI. He had never seen
him. Yeah.
The one,
but that was funny too. Yeah.
He intends to watch it though. But it's a classic film. There's a lot of movie memorabilia collectors out there. Those shoes were insured for $1 million. Once they were returned and verified by the Smithsonian, they went to auction, and we won't give the price. But you were allowed at that auction. That was a big to-do to be in an auction like that.
That was huge. There was only one other media entity that was there. And it was a really big deal to be able to be there and to capture that and experience this live. We did not know that this auction would make history. I will give that little teaser. But it was really something to be part of that. And it was at an auction house, Heritage Auctions it was Fort Worth, Texas. And just going down and being part of that as the culmination to this entire project. It was right around Christmas time that we went, and it was really remarkable to be there for that and to see the shoes finally in person, to be able to see them right there, that, these shoes that we had been talking about and researching and studying, and finally to be able to see those after 6 or 7 years was incredible. Everybody
had closure, and thank God Michael Shaw got reimbursed for it. And thank you for making the documentary and bringing that to the attention. Yes. It's one of those forgotten crimes. It made national news when it first happened, but people forgot about it over the years. Maria, thank you for being on the show. The show is called Ruby Red Handed. It's on Hulu, and it's less than 2 hours. What is it, about an hour and a half?
Yeah, I think so. So.
It's a really quick documentary. I highly recommend everybody. Thank you for being on the show. Stick around after we cut off the broadcast. Everybody follow me on Pelarenos Police Project on Facebook and on Twitter. I'm at Police Project 1. See you next week right here on WRMN 1410 AM.